The moment I stepped into that grand ballroom, I heard her say it. Vanessa Caldwell, my brother's flawless fiancée, leaned toward her bridesmaids, a crystal champagne flute balanced perfectly between manicured fingers. Her voice dropped into a whisper that wasn't meant to be quiet at all. "Oh, wonderful," she said, lips curling into a smile sharp enough to cut glass. The small-town charity case finally showed up. Laughter rippled through the group, soft, polished, practiced laughter, the kind people use when they want cruelty to sound elegant. She never even looked at me. To Vanessa, I wasn't a person. I was an inconvenience, an embarrassing detail that refused to stay edited out of her perfect evening. Just a girl who crawled out of nowhere to ruin the aesthetic of her engagement party. What she didn't know, what nobody in that glittering room knew, was that 3 years ago, I signed the ownership papers for this very place, the Aurora Grand Hotel. Every chandelier glowing above her head belonged to me. Every glass of imported champagne being passed around the room was paid for by me. Every inch of marble beneath her designer heels existed because I decided it would. And before the night was over, that whisper was going to cost her everything. My name is Elena Harper. I'm 31 years old and I grew up in Redwood Hollow, Oregon, a town so small the loudest traffic we ever had was when logging trucks stalled on Main Street. I left when I was 18 with one suitcase, $200, and the quiet understanding that there wasn't really a place for me in my own family. I had an older brother, Daniel Harper, the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. Growing up, every achievement of mine felt like a comparison I had already lost. If I succeeded, Daniel succeeded more. If I tried, Daniel excelled. If I mattered at all, it was only in relation to him. So I disappeared. At least, that's what everyone back home believed. They imagined me struggling somewhere in the city, barely surviving, learning hard lessons about ambition. For the first 2 years, they were right. What they never knew was how closely I watched, how carefully I learned, how quietly I built something piece by piece, while the world assumed I had failed. Because when you start from nothing, you learn an important truth. People underestimate silence, and sometimes silence becomes power. Tonight I stood inside my own hotel wearing worn boots and simple clothes, looking exactly like the girl they remembered. Invisible, forgettable, easy to dismiss. Which was perfect, because in just a few hours, Vanessa Caldwell was going to discover a lesson people like her never expect to learn. Never humiliate someone standing quietly in the corner, especially when she owns the ground beneath your feet. I almost didn't come. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, tucked inside a thick ivory envelope that looked far more expensive than anything my family had ever sent me before. My name, Elena Harper, was written in elegant gold script, the kind reserved for people who mattered. I turned it over in my hands for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Daniel Harper and Vanessa Caldwell. Engagement celebration, Aurora Grand Hotel. For a moment, I thought it was a joke, not the engagement. Daniel had always been the type to move through life smoothly, collecting achievements and admiration without effort. No, what surprised me was the location, my hotel. They had booked my flagship property without realizing who owned it. I should have declined immediately. That would have been the easier choice. Safe, clean, distant. Instead, I drove. The highway stretched endlessly beneath a gray Oregon sky as Redwood Hollow faded behind me in the rearview mirror. I hadn't been back in years, but I passed through anyway before heading to the city. Old habits, I guess. Or maybe I needed the reminder. The same diner still stood on the corner. The same gas station sign flickered unevenly. The same houses where everyone knew everyone else's business. Nothing changed there, except me. When I left at 18, I promised myself I would never return unless I had become someone impossible to ignore. Back then, I slept on a borrowed couch and counted coins before buying groceries. I worked mornings cleaning hotel rooms and nights studying business manuals I borrowed from the public library. No one saw those years. No one saw the blisters on my hands or the nights I cried quietly because failure felt closer than success. And certainly no one back home imagined that the girl they pitied would one day own 6 boutique hotels across the West Coast. By the time the Aurora Grande rose into view against the evening skyline, the sun had already begun to set, painting the glass exterior in gold and fire. I parked in the underground garage instead of using the private entrance reserved for executives. Habit again, or maybe protection. Upstairs, the ballroom buzzed with music and laughter long before I stepped inside. My staff moved flawlessly through the space, servers balancing trays, coordinators adjusting floral arrangements, lighting casting a soft glow across polished marble floors. Everything ran perfectly. It always did. Wesley Grant, my general manager, noticed me immediately from across the room. His expression flickered with recognition before settling into professional neutrality. We had an understanding. When I attended events anonymously, I was just another guest. He gave the smallest nod. I nodded back. For tonight, Elena Harper wasn't the CEO of Aurora Hospitality Group. I was just the overlooked sister. I paused near the entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked compared to everyone else. Designer gowns shimmered under chandelier light. Tailored suits filled the room with effortless confidence. Meanwhile, I wore dark jeans, polished boots, and a simple cream blouse. Ironically, my outfit cost more than most of the room combined. But real wealth rarely announces itself. Across the ballroom, I spotted my mother first. Margaret Harper stood surrounded by women who leaned in eagerly as she spoke, her smile wide, proud, radiant. Even from a distance, I knew exactly what she was saying. Daniel this, Vanessa that, our future daughter-in-law, such a perfect match. Daniel stood nearby, laughing easily beside Vanessa Caldwell. Tall, elegant, flawless Vanessa, who seemed born for rooms like this. She moved through conversations like a practiced performance, touching arms lightly, smiling at exactly the right moments. People gravitated toward her. They always gravitated toward people who looked like certainty. For a second, I wondered if Daniel had noticed I arrived. He hadn't. Something inside me tightened, not sharp enough to hurt anymore, just familiar, like an old scar reacting to cold weather. I told myself it didn't matter. I hadn't come for recognition. I had come because some stubborn part of me still hoped things might feel different, that maybe time had softened old roles, that maybe, just once, I wouldn't feel like the extra chair pulled awkwardly to the edge of a family table. I took a slow breath and stepped fully into the room. That was when I heard Vanessa's voice behind me, amused, careless, cruel. And just like that, every old feeling I thought I'd outgrown came rushing back. The night had officially begun. "Oh, wonderful," Vanessa said softly behind me, her voice carrying just enough to reach the surrounding circle. The small-town charity case finally made it. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. That was what made it worse. It was controlled, polite, the kind designed to make cruelty sound sophisticated. I didn't turn around immediately. For a moment, I simply stood there, staring at the reflection of the ballroom lights in the polished marble floor, letting the words settle somewhere deep inside me. It was strange how quickly old wounds remembered their shape. Some things never really heal, they just wait. When I finally turned, Vanessa Caldwell was exactly as flawless up close as she appeared from across the room. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect confidence born from a lifetime of never being questioned. Her bridesmaids watched me with open curiosity, like spectators waiting to see how the joke would land. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "Elena, right? Daniel's sister. Not his sister Elena, just an afterthought attached to his name." "That's me," I said calmly. Her eyes flicked over my boots, my jeans, my simple blouse. The assessment took less than a second. "Oh," she said, smiling sweetly. "I thought tonight was formal." "It is," I replied. Another small ripple of laughter. I smiled politely and stepped past them toward the bar before my expression could betray anything else. Years ago, moments like that would have followed me for days. Tonight, they felt different. Not painless, but distant. Like watching a memory replay instead of living it. Still, my chest felt tight. The bartender, one of my senior staff members, recognized me instantly, but didn't react. Professional to the end. He simply asked what I wanted. "Sparkling water," I said. As he prepared the drink, I watched the room carefully. Observation had always been my survival skill. My mother approached first, exactly as expected. Margaret Harper moved toward me with the expression she reserved for situations she found mildly embarrassing, but socially unavoidable. "Elena," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You made it." Her eyes dropped immediately to my outfit. "You couldn't find something more appropriate?" she asked quietly. "Vanessa's family is very refined." She emphasized the last word gently, like a correction meant to help. I swallowed the familiar response rising in my throat. "I came straight from work," I said. She sighed. The same sigh I remembered from childhood, the one that meant disappointment disguised as patience. "Well," she said, adjusting her bracelet, "try not to stand out too much tonight." Then she was gone, pulled back into conversations that mattered more. I stared at my drink for a moment. Funny thing was, I had come straight from work. From meetings about expansion contracts worth more than anyone in this room probably imagined. But explaining that felt unnecessary. People rarely believe truths that don't match the version of you they've already decided on. Across the ballroom, Daniel finally noticed me. He walked over with an easy smile, arms already opening for a quick hug. "Hey, kid," he said. Kid. I was 31. "Glad you could come," he added, glancing over his shoulder as if tracking someone more important. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He nodded distractedly. "Vanessa's amazing, you know. Everything just feels right." I followed his gaze toward her, laughing among guests. "She seems happy," I said carefully. Daniel smiled, relieved by my neutrality, then leaned closer. "Mom gave her Grandma Rose's necklace," he said proudly. "Wasn't that generous?" The words hit harder than Vanessa's insult ever could. For a second, the music faded beneath a rushing sound in my ears. Grandma Rose's necklace. The pendant she had pressed into my palm years ago while sitting beside her hospital bed, whispering that it belonged to me because I was her fighter, the one who would build something of her own. I looked across the room. There it was, hanging around Vanessa's neck, catching the chandelier light as she laughed. My breath left slowly. Daniel kept talking, unaware. She loved it instantly. Of course she did. I nodded, forcing a smile. "That's nice." He squeezed my shoulder before drifting back toward his fiancée, leaving me standing alone again. I realized then that nothing about tonight was accidental. I wasn't invited because I was missed. I was invited so the picture would look complete. And as I stood there, invisible in a room I owned, I wondered how many people in this world quietly endured moments like this, smiling politely while carrying stories no one bothered to ask about. I took a slow sip of sparkling water. 3 hours, I reminded myself. Just 3 more hours. I couldn't stop looking at it. The necklace rested perfectly against Vanessa Caldwell's collarbone, the small oval pendant catching light every time she turned her head. Guests admired it openly, leaning closer, complimenting its antique elegance, asking where it came from. Each time, Vanessa smiled modestly. "Oh, it's a family heirloom," she said. "Daniel's mother insisted I have it." Family heirloom. The words felt like sandpaper against my chest. I moved farther into the ballroom, pretending to examine the floral arrangements while keeping her in my peripheral vision. Years of running hotels had trained me to notice details automatically. Posture, tone, tension, the invisible currents beneath conversations. And something about Vanessa's family felt rehearsed. Her parents stood near the center of the room, greeting guests with polished confidence. Franklin Caldwell shook hands too firmly, laughing just a little too loudly. His wife, Lorraine, smiled constantly but never relaxed, her eyes scanning the room as though calculating something. They looked wealthy. But wealth has a rhythm, an ease you can't fake forever. These two were performing it. A memory surfaced without warning. Grandma Rose sitting beside me on the porch years ago, pressing the necklace into my hand while cicadas hummed in the summer heat. "This belongs to you someday," she had said quietly, "because you understand what it means to earn things." I had laughed back then, embarrassed by the seriousness in her voice. Now my fingers curled instinctively, remembering the weight of the pendant. Warm from her skin, real in a way nothing in this ballroom felt. I blinked the memory away. The music shifted to something slower, conversations growing louder as champagne continued flowing. Servers passed trays through the crowd, moving exactly as trained, Everything operated perfectly, because it always did when I was in charge. Even if no one knew it, I stepped toward a quieter hallway near the restrooms, needing air more than anything else. The noise faded behind me, replaced by softer echoes and the distant hum of the kitchen. That was when I heard a voice. Franklin Caldwell. He stood around the corner, phone pressed tightly to his ear, back turned toward me. "Now, I told you the wedding has to happen," he said in a low, urgent tone. "The Harper family has money. Real money." I froze. He paced slowly, running a hand through his hair. "No, we just need to get through the ceremony," he continued. "After that, everything stabilizes." A pause. His voice dropped further. "Yes, investors are getting nervous, but once this is secured, we're covered." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up, the way it always did when something important clicked into place. He ended the call and walked back toward the ballroom, his confident smile snapping back into position before he even reached the doors. I remained still long after he disappeared. The Harper family has money. Confusion replaced shock. My parents didn't have money. Their house still carried a mortgage, one I had quietly been paying for years through anonymous transfers. Daniel worked a stable but ordinary job. There was no hidden fortune. So why did Franklin believe there was? I returned to the ballroom slowly, my perspective shifting with every step. Now I watched differently. Franklin checked his phone every few minutes. Lorraine adjusted her jewelry repeatedly, fingers trembling slightly when she thought no one noticed. Vanessa laughed easily, but her eyes tracked reactions constantly, measuring approval, searching for reassurance, not confidence, desperation. Pieces began forming a pattern I didn't like. I stopped near a mirrored column, pretending to check my phone while observing Daniel speaking proudly with guests. He looked happy, genuinely happy, completely unaware of the tension threading through his future in-laws. A familiar ache settled in my chest. Daniel had always trusted easily. It was part of what made people love him, and part of what made him vulnerable. Across the room, Vanessa touched the necklace again, absent-mindedly, like someone confirming possession. Something inside me hardened. That necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was the last proof that someone in my family had truly seen me. Not compared, not measured, not dismissed. And now it hung around the neck of a stranger who had laughed at me minutes earlier. I exhaled slowly. Maybe tonight wasn't only about old wounds after all. Maybe something else was happening beneath the surface. Something far more dangerous than a cruel comment or a stolen heirloom. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't thinking about leaving early. I was thinking about staying, watching, and finding out exactly why Vanessa Caldwell's family believed they had just secured their future by marrying into mine. Once you start looking for lies, they become impossible to unsee. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, appearing absorbed in my phone while my attention tracked the Caldwell family with quiet precision. Years of negotiations and acquisitions had taught me one thing. Truth rarely announces itself. It leaks through small inconsistencies, gestures that arrive half a second too late, smiles that don't reach the eyes. Franklin Caldwell laughed loudly at something a guest said, but his hand tightened around his glass hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Lorraine nodded through conversations, yet barely listened, her gaze drifting repeatedly toward the exits. And Vanessa watched Daniel, not lovingly, carefully, like someone monitoring an investment. The realization unsettled me more than I expected. I moved toward a quieter seating area, pretending to scroll messages while replaying Franklin's phone call in my mind. The Harper family has money. The assumption made sense from the outside. My parents' mortgage payments had disappeared years ago, medical bills quietly handled, utilities never late, stability appearing out of nowhere. They thought Daniel was responsible. Of course they did. In my mother's version of reality, success always belonged to him. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Every anonymous transfer I sent through Aurora Hospitality had built an illusion, one that now seemed to be attracting the wrong kind of attention. Across the room, Daniel wrapped an arm around Vanessa's waist as guests congratulated them. He looked proud, grounded, certain he had chosen the right future. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike when we were kids, running behind me down our uneven street until I finally balanced on my own. "Don't look back," he had shouted. "Just keep going." Back then, he had believed in me completely. Somewhere along the way, that changed. A sudden burst of laughter pulled me from the memory. Vanessa approached with two bridesmaids trailing behind her like satellites. "Elena," she said brightly, stopping in front of me. "There you are. I was hoping we could talk." Her tone was friendly enough that anyone nearby would assume warmth. Up close, though, her smile felt sharp. "Of course," I said. She guided me toward a quieter corner near a decorative partition, far enough from the crowd that conversations blurred into background noise. The moment we were alone, her expression shifted. The warmth vanished. "I think it's important we understand each other," she said softly. I waited. She folded her arms lightly. "Daniel told me you've always had a complicated relationship with the family." There it was, the narrative already written without me. "I wouldn't call it complicated," I replied evenly. She smiled faintly. "You send money home every month, don't you?" My heartbeat paused. "Interesting." "I help when I can," I said carefully. Vanessa tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle she had nearly solved. "That's what confuses me," she continued. "Why would someone struggling so much try so hard to impress people who clearly moved on?" The words landed gently, almost kindly, which somehow made them crueler. I held her gaze. "Maybe it isn't about impressing anyone." She laughed softly. "Oh, Elena," she said, "you don't have to pretend with me. I understand insecurity." She stepped closer. "Once Daniel and I are married, things will be different," she added. "We'll be making decisions for this family. And honestly, it might be easier for everyone if you kept a little distance." The implication hung between us. "You don't belong here." I felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize for existing. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something colder, clarity. Vanessa believed she understood me completely. She thought I was desperate for approval. She thought Daniel's success defined the family's future. And most importantly, she thought I had no power. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly. Her smile returned, satisfied, as though she had just handled an uncomfortable obligation. "I'm glad we talked," she replied, patting my arm gently before turning back toward the party. I watched her walk away, confidence restored, certain she had put me in my place. Behind her, the necklace glimmered under chandelier light. For the first time that evening, anger faded into something sharper. Focus. Because Vanessa Caldwell wasn't just arrogant. She was nervous. And nervous people only try to control situations when they're afraid of losing them. I exhaled slowly and glanced across the ballroom toward Wesley, who stood near the service entrance reviewing a tablet. Our eyes met briefly. He raised an eyebrow, a silent question. "Everything okay?" I gave the smallest shake of my head. No, something was very wrong tonight. And I was starting to believe this engagement party wasn't a celebration at all. It was a transaction, one I intended to understand before the night was over. I found Wesley near the service corridor just beyond the ballroom doors. The moment I stepped into the quieter hallway, the music softened behind me, replaced by the steady rhythm of kitchen activity. Plates clinking, staff moving with practiced urgency, voices low and professional. It grounded me instantly. This was my world, controlled, predictable. Wesley looked up from his tablet and immediately read my expression. "Something wrong?" he asked quietly. He didn't call me Ms. Harper, not here. Not when I chose anonymity. "I need information," I said. That was enough. Wesley had worked with me long enough to know I never asked without reason. He guided me farther down the corridor, away from passing staff. "What kind?" he asked. "The Caldwell family," I said. "Business history, public records, anything unusual." His brows drew together slightly, but he nodded. "I'll see what I can find." No questions, no hesitation. That was why I trusted him. As he walked away, already pulling out his phone, I leaned briefly against the cool wall, replaying the evening piece by piece. The insults, Franklin's phone call, Vanessa's carefully worded warning. None of it felt random anymore. This wasn't about marriage. It was strategy. I returned to the ballroom slowly, forcing my posture to relax. Guests were louder now, champagne loosening conversations. The engagement slideshow played across large screens, smiling photos of Daniel and Vanessa hiking, dining, laughing together. A perfectly edited love story. Daniel stood near the stage talking animatedly with friends, completely unaware of the undercurrent building beneath his future. For a moment, guilt flickered through me. Part of me wanted to pull him aside, tell him everything I suspected, warn him before things went further. But suspicion wasn't proof, and Daniel had never been good at believing me when it mattered. Across the room, my mother laughed brightly beside Lorraine Caldwell, already behaving like family. Watching them together made something twist painfully in my chest. How easily roles shifted when appearances fit expectations. A vibration in my phone interrupted my thoughts. "Wesley, check your email." I moved toward a quieter corner and opened the message. A folder appeared. Articles, financial summaries, property filings. The deeper I read, the colder I felt. The Caldwell Real Estate Group had expanded rapidly over the last decade. Too rapidly. Multiple development projects announced, few completed. Investors mentioned in local reports, but no clear outcomes. Lawsuits quietly settled. And then something worse. A bankruptcy filing tied to a different company name 5 years earlier. Same leadership, different identities. I scrolled faster. Another article from Arizona mentioned an investigation into missing investor funds connected to a development that never broke ground. My stomach tightened. This wasn't mismanagement. This was a pattern. A second message appeared from Wesley. "There's more. Sending now." New documents loaded. Corporate dissolutions followed by newly formed companies months later. Addresses changing. Names slightly altered. Reinvention. Over and over again. I looked up instinctively toward Vanessa. She laughed at something Daniel said, slipping her hand into his arm, the picture of effortless affection. But now I saw it differently. Every smile measured. Every interaction intentional. My phone buzzed again. "Wesley, if this is accurate, they're 6 months from collapse." The words settled heavily. Suddenly, Franklin's phone call made perfect sense. They believed the Harper family had money. They believed Daniel represented stability. An escape route. I lowered my phone slowly. If they were desperate enough, this marriage wasn't romance. It was survival. And Daniel had no idea. Anger rose unexpectedly, not just toward the Caldwells, but toward myself. I had spent years protecting my family quietly, staying distant to avoid reopening old wounds. But distance had created vulnerability. They had mistaken silence for weakness. Across the ballroom, Vanessa's eyes briefly met mine. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. Did she sense it? Did she realize I was beginning to understand? She quickly looked away, resuming her performance. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. This was bigger than a stolen necklace or a cruel comment. If I was right, my brother wasn't just being mocked behind closed doors. He was being targeted. And my family, flawed, complicated, painful as they were, stood directly in the path of something dangerous. I typed a short reply to Wesley. "Dig deeper. Everything you can." Then I slipped my phone back into my pocket and lifted my glass, blending once again into the celebration. On the surface, nothing had changed. Music played. Guests laughed. The engagement party continued exactly as planned. But beneath the glitter and champagne, the truth was beginning to surface. And once truth starts moving, it doesn't stop. The party grew louder as the night moved on, but for me, everything felt strangely quiet. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. I watched Vanessa Caldwell glide through the ballroom again, accepting compliments, touching arms lightly, laughing at exactly the right moments. Earlier, she had looked confident. Now I recognized the difference between confidence and control. She wasn't enjoying the evening. She was managing it. Franklin checked his phone every few minutes. Lorraine barely touched her drink, her fingers tapping the glass in restless rhythm. Even Daniel seemed slightly unsettled, though he couldn't explain why. His smile lingering a little too long, his eyes searching Vanessa's face for reassurance. The illusion was beginning to strain. My phone vibrated. Another message from Wesley. "You need to see this." I slipped toward the hallway again and opened the file he sent. Court records. Not rumors, not speculation. Evidence. An investigation opened 2 years earlier under a different company name. Same financial structure, same investors, same sudden disappearance of funds. The Caldwells had dissolved the company just before formal charges were filed. They hadn't failed. They had escaped. A second attachment loaded. Identity records tied to Vanessa. I stared at the screen. Different surname. Different state. 3 years ago. My pulse slowed, turning cold and precise. Vanessa Caldwell wasn't her original name, which meant the engagement wasn't simply opportunistic, it was planned. I leaned against the wall, breathing steadily while anger tried to rise. Not explosive anger. Something deeper, sharper, protective. Daniel might have overlooked warning signs, but he didn't deserve to be used. None of them did. Even my mother. The realization surprised me. After everything, years of comparison, dismissal, silence, I still didn't want to see them hurt. Family was strange that way. Love didn't disappear just because it should have. Footsteps approached. I locked my phone and turned as Vanessa herself stepped into the hallway. Of course she did. Her smile appeared instantly, polished and warm. "There you are," she said. "You keep disappearing." "I needed air," I replied. She studied my face carefully, searching for something. "You know," she said casually, "Daniel worries about you." That almost made me laugh. "Does he?" "He says you've always felt left behind," she continued gently. "I think that must be hard." Her tone was sympathetic, but her eyes weren't. This wasn't concern. It was positioning. She wanted me smaller, predictable, safe. "I'm doing fine," I said. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I just want tonight to go smoothly," she said. "Daniel deserves that. And sometimes, unresolved family dynamics create unnecessary drama." There it was again. A warning disguised as kindness. I realized then she wasn't trying to insult me anymore. She was trying to manage risk. She was afraid I might disrupt something, which meant she sensed the shift. I smiled faintly. "I wouldn't dream of ruining your evening," I said. Relief flickered across her face, quick, almost invisible. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back toward the ballroom. As she walked away, I noticed her shoulders drop slightly, tension releasing. She thought she had secured control again. She thought I would stay quiet. I waited until she disappeared before unlocking my phone once more. Another message from Wesley arrived. "Background confirms multiple identity changes. Sending full timeline." I exhaled slowly. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It was evidence. And evidence changes everything. I glanced back toward the ballroom entrance, watching guests laugh beneath chandeliers, completely unaware that the celebration they were attending sat on the edge of collapse. It struck me then how easily people accept appearances. Most never look closer. Not because they can't, but because they don't expect danger wrapped in elegance. Funny thing was, I used to be like that too. If there was one thing I had learned building my life from nothing, it was this. The strongest people aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones quietly paying attention while everyone else celebrates. And sometimes, the moment you realize something is wrong is the moment everything begins to change. I typed a message to Wesley. "Prepare the AV system. I may need it tonight." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Understood. I slipped the phone away and walked back into the ballroom, my expression calm, my steps steady. The music swelled. Guests raised glasses. Daniel laughed beside the woman he believed he loved. And somewhere deep inside me, a decision began forming. Slow, inevitable, impossible to reverse. Tonight wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. I stood near the back of the ballroom, watching Daniel laugh at something one of his friends said, and tried to imagine what the next hour would look like if I did nothing. The answer came too easily. The engagement would continue. The wedding would follow. Vanessa and her family would secure whatever financial stability they believed waited on the other side of this marriage. And when the truth finally surfaced, because schemes like theirs always collapse eventually, my family would be left standing in the wreckage. Public embarrassment, financial damage, a broken marriage. Daniel's trust shattered in the cruelest possible way. Part of me whispered that maybe they deserved it. The thought startled me with its honesty. My mother had spent years comparing me unfavorably to my brother. Daniel had rarely defended me. I had built an entire life alone while they assumed I was failing somewhere quietly. Letting consequences unfold wouldn't be revenge. It would be justice. I crossed my arms, watching Vanessa across the room as she greeted another group of guests. She looked radiant, confident, untouchable. For a moment, I imagined simply leaving, driving away, letting the illusion continue without me. No confrontation, no emotional fallout, no reopening wounds I had spent years learning to live around. It would be easier, but then another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. Daniel running beside my bicycle when we were kids, refusing to let go even after I begged him to stop helping. "I've got you," he had said, breathless but determined. Back then he meant it. Somewhere along the way, life had changed us both. Expectations, favoritism, distance, all of it had quietly rewritten our relationship. Still, that version of him existed once, and maybe it still did. I exhaled slowly. Protecting someone who had never protected me felt unfair, but walking away felt worse. My phone vibrated again. A message from Rebecca Lawson, my attorney. Confirmed, federal investigation active, warrants likely pending. A second message followed moments later. If they're present tonight, authorities would want notification. The decision solidified instantly. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about preventing harm. I stepped toward the quieter corridor again and called her. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "Elena." "I need verification," I said. "Everything." "You already have it," she replied calmly. "But I've contacted a federal investigator assigned to the case. If what you're telling me is accurate, they've been trying to locate this group for months." I closed my eyes briefly. "So they're running?" "Yes," she said. "And if this engagement connects them to perceived wealth, it explains why they've stayed put this long." I looked back toward the ballroom entrance. Music drifted outward, cheerful and oblivious. "How fast could someone get here?" I asked. A pause. "Within the hour." That aligned perfectly with the evening's schedule. Franklin's formal toast was planned for 9 o'clock. The symbolic welcome into the family. I almost laughed at the irony. "Keep them informed," I said quietly. When the call ended, I remained standing there, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This would change everything. Not just for the Caldwells, for my family, for me. Because once the truth came out, I wouldn't be able to stay invisible anymore. The quiet distance I had built between myself and my past would disappear in a single moment. I returned to the ballroom slowly. Guests gathered closer to the stage now, anticipation building for speeches. Staff adjusted lighting subtly, preparing for the toast. Wesley caught my eye from across the room. I gave a small nod. "Not yet. Soon?" Daniel spotted me again and walked over, his smile softer this time. "Hey," he said, "can we talk later? Something feels off tonight." The word surprised me. "You feel it too?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just nervous." I studied his face. Genuine confusion, not suspicion. He still trusted completely. "After the toast," I said gently. "We'll talk then." He nodded, relieved, and returned to Vanessa's side. I watched them together, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. The truth was coming whether anyone was ready or not. Across the ballroom, Vanessa laughed again, unaware that the carefully constructed future she believed was secured was already beginning to unravel. I checked the time. 8:47 p.m., 13 minutes until everything changed. And for the first time that night, I understood something clearly. This wasn't revenge. It was a choice. A choice about who I wanted to be when given the power to hurt people who had hurt me first. I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward into the crowd. The next chapter of the night had already begun. By 8:50, the ballroom had shifted into anticipation. Guests slowly gravitated toward the stage, drinks refreshed, conversations softening into expectant murmurs. The DJ lowered the music to a gentle background melody while staff adjusted lighting, so the focus naturally centered on the podium. Everything appeared effortless. It always did when planning was invisible. I stood near the back wall, watching the room with the same calm focus I used during high-stakes negotiations. The difference tonight was that the outcome wasn't measured in contracts or profit margins. It was measured in truth. Wesley approached quietly from my left, holding a tablet against his side. "The system's ready," he said under his breath. "Just say when." I nodded once. On the surface, he looked like any manager overseeing an event. No one nearby paid attention. That anonymity was exactly why I trusted him with moments like this. "Federal agents confirmed?" he asked. "They're on their way," I replied. His expression didn't change, but his posture straightened slightly. "Understood." He walked away toward the control room without another word. Across the ballroom, Franklin Caldwell adjusted his tie while speaking to a cluster of guests. He looked confident again, the earlier tension hidden behind practiced charisma. Lorraine stood beside my mother, laughing politely at something neither of them seemed fully invested in. Vanessa moved through the crowd like the evening's centerpiece, accepting congratulations with effortless grace. If someone walked in at that moment, they would see nothing but celebration. I wondered how many disasters in history had begun in rooms that looked exactly like this. Elegant, comfortable, safe. Daniel found me again near the refreshment table. "You're really quiet tonight," he said. "I'm observing," I answered. He smiled faintly. "You always did that." For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I keep feeling like something's wrong," he admitted finally. "I can't explain it." I studied him carefully. Instinct was trying to reach him, but love made people doubt themselves. "Sometimes," I said gently, "your instincts notice things before your mind catches up." He nodded slowly, absorbing that, though confusion still clouded his expression. "After the toast," I reminded him. "Yeah," he said, "after the toast." He returned to Vanessa, slipping naturally back into the role of devoted fiancé. I watched her reaction when he approached, relief flickering briefly across her face before she masked it with affection. She was watching him closely tonight, making sure he stayed close, making sure nothing unexpected happened. My phone buzzed softly. "Rebecca, agents arriving in 10 minutes, waiting nearby." The timing aligned perfectly. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked around the ballroom one more time. The chandeliers glowed warmly overhead. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell like waves. For years, I had built my life quietly, avoiding scenes, avoiding confrontation, choosing distance over conflict. Tonight would erase that distance completely. Once the truth appeared, there would be no returning to anonymity. My family would finally see who I really was. The thought should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt heavy, because recognition often arrives wrapped in consequences. At 8:57, Franklin stepped toward the stage. The room gradually quieted as guests turned their attention forward. Staff dimmed the surrounding lights slightly, leaving the podium illuminated. Vanessa squeezed Daniel's hand, smiling brightly at the crowd. Perfect timing. Perfect performance. I caught Wesley's eye across the room. He stood near the control booth, waiting. My heartbeat remained steady. No anger, no hesitation, just certainty. Franklin tapped the microphone, producing a soft echo through the ballroom speakers. "Good evening, everyone," he began warmly. "Thank you all for joining us to celebrate this beautiful union." Applause followed. He spoke easily about family, about future grandchildren, about joining two successful families together. Each word sounded polished, rehearsed, and now painfully ironic. I glanced at my phone. 8:59. This was the moment. Franklin raised his glass, smiling confidently as he prepared to conclude. "To love," he said, "to family." I typed a single word and pressed send. "Now." Across the ballroom, Wesley nodded almost imperceptibly. The large screens behind the stage flickered. At first, guests assumed it was part of the slideshow. Smiling photos of Daniel and Vanessa disappeared. The room waited. And then the first document appeared, a court filing, official seals glowing under chandelier light. A name no one in the room recognized, Sandra Williams. Franklin's smile froze, and the celebration began to unravel. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. The ballroom remained quiet for a strange, suspended second, guests squinting at the screens as though waiting for the slideshow to correct itself. Franklin Caldwell blinked at the projection behind him, confusion flickering across his face before his practiced smile returned. "There seems to be a small technical issue," he said into the microphone, chuckling lightly. "If someone could—" The screen changed again. Another document replaced the first. Financial records, highlighted transfers, legal terminology unmistakable even to those unfamiliar with it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Franklin's voice faltered. Behind him, Vanessa turned slowly toward the screens, her champagne glass lowering inch by inch. The color drained from her face. Then came the third image, a news article headline from Arizona detailing an investor fraud investigation. And beneath it, a photograph, younger, different hairstyle, same eyes. The name beneath the photo read, Sandra Williams. The room erupted into whispers. Daniel frowned, looking from the screen to Vanessa and back again, confusion rapidly turning into disbelief. "What is this?" someone asked loudly. Franklin stepped away from the podium, reaching toward the AV booth. "Turn this off," he snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. "Now." The screens didn't change. More documents appeared. Corporate dissolutions, lawsuits, identity records. Each slide peeled away another layer of the illusion. Vanessa's hand began to shake. "This isn't real," she said sharply, though no one had accused her yet. "This is fake." Her voice sounded smaller than before. Fear had replaced confidence. Two members of hotel security quietly moved toward the exits, following instructions already given. Guests instinctively stepped aside, creating space in the center of the ballroom. Daniel looked at her again, searching desperately for reassurance. "Vanessa?" he asked softly. She grabbed his arm. "You believe me, right? This is someone trying to sabotage us." But doubt had already taken root. Franklin began pushing through the crowd toward the doors, Lorraine close behind him. Too late. The ballroom doors opened. 4 figures entered calmly, dressed in dark suits, badges visible beneath the lights. Conversation died instantly. Agent Carla Mendez stepped forward with quiet authority. "Franklin Caldwell," she said clearly, "or whichever name you're currently using." The room went completely silent. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, investment fraud, and conspiracy." Gasps echoed around the ballroom. Franklin froze, calculation flashing across his face as though searching for an escape that no longer existed. Security staff blocked his path without touching him. Lorraine began crying immediately, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she protested weakly. Vanessa stepped backward, shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't happening." Daniel slowly pulled his arm free from her grasp. "I don't understand," he said, voice unsteady. "Tell me this isn't true." For the first time all night, Vanessa had no performance ready. Her eyes darted around the room, searching, panicking, until they landed on me. Recognition hit, not recognition of identity. Recognition of cause. "You," she said, pointing, voice rising. "You did this." Guests turned toward me as I stepped forward through the parted crowd. My boots echoed softly against the marble floor. Every eye followed. The invisible sister. The overlooked guest. Agent Mendez nodded slightly as I approached, confirmation passing silently between us. Franklin was being handcuffed behind the stage. Lorraine sobbed openly. Vanessa stood frozen, fury replacing fear. I reached the podium and took the microphone from Franklin's trembling hand. The room held its breath. "Good evening," I said calmly. My voice carried clearly through the speakers. "I apologize for interrupting the celebration," I continued, "but I believe everyone here deserves to know who they were celebrating tonight." Behind me, another document appeared, official confirmation of the investigation. Vanessa laughed sharply, desperate now. "She's lying," she shouted. "She's jealous. She's nobody." I met her gaze steadily. "That's interesting," I said quietly, because federal investigators seemed to disagree. Right on cue, Agent Mendez stepped forward again, signaling her team. Vanessa's composure shattered completely. She lunged toward me, rage overtaking panic. Security intercepted her instantly. "You ruined everything," she screamed. "You were supposed to be nothing." The words echoed through the stunned ballroom. I leaned slightly closer, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "The mistake," I said softly, "was assuming you knew who I was." Around us, the illusion collapsed completely. The engagement party was over, and the truth had finally taken center stage. For several seconds after Vanessa was pulled away, no one moved. The ballroom, once filled with laughter and music, stood frozen in stunned silence. Guests stared at the stage, at the federal agents escorting Franklin and Lorraine Caldwell toward the exit, at the shattered remains of an evening that only minutes ago had promised celebration. Vanessa's voice echoed faintly down the hallway as she continued shouting protests that grew weaker with distance. Then the doors closed, and the quiet that followed felt heavier than noise. I turned back toward the crowd, still holding the microphone. Dozens of unfamiliar faces watched me now with curiosity instead of dismissal. Some whispered. Others simply stared, trying to reconcile the woman standing on stage with the one they had ignored earlier. I set the microphone down gently. "This hotel," Wesley's voice announced calmly over the speakers, "is owned by Aurora Hospitality Group. Please welcome its founder and CEO, Miss Elena Harper." The words landed like a second shockwave. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, his eyes moving slowly around the ballroom as realization settled in piece by piece. I stepped forward again, not because I wanted attention, but because hiding was no longer possible. "I didn't plan for tonight to happen this way," I said quietly. But sometimes the truth arrives whether we're ready or not. No one interrupted. Behind me, the screens faded to black. "I built this company starting as a cleaning assistant in a small hotel," I continued. "Everything you see here exists because someone once believed a quiet girl from a small town could become more than people expected." My voice softened slightly. "And sometimes, people don't notice who's standing beside them until circumstances force them to look." I stepped away from the podium. The spell broke gradually. Conversations returned in cautious murmurs. The DJ hesitated before starting soft music again, unsure whether celebration was appropriate anymore. Daniel approached first. He looked shaken, not just by Vanessa's arrest, but by everything he had just learned. "You own this place?" he asked. I nodded. "And the money Mom kept receiving?" His voice trailed off. "Yes," I said gently, "that was me." He exhaled slowly, emotion crossing his face in waves. Confusion, guilt, understanding. "I thought," he began, then stopped. "I thought I knew you." "I know," I said. For the first time in years, he didn't look at me like a younger sister trailing behind him. He looked at me like someone seeing a stranger, or maybe finally seeing me clearly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. The words weren't dramatic, but they were real. Before I could respond, my mother approached hesitantly. Margaret Harper looked smaller somehow, uncertainty replacing the confidence she usually carried. "Elena," she whispered, tears forming, "all this time." I showed her my phone, records of payments, transfers, years of quiet support. Her hands trembled. "It was you," she said softly. "It was always me." She covered her mouth, emotion overwhelming her. For once, she had no correction, no comparison, no expectation to offer. Only silence. Across the room, something caught my eye. The necklace. It lay on the floor near the dance floor where Vanessa must have thrown it during the chaos. Daniel picked it up carefully and walked back toward me. "She shouldn't have had this," he said. He placed it gently into my hand. The familiar weight settled into my palm, warm and grounding, like something lost finally returning home. For a moment, none of us spoke. Not everything was healed. Not everything would be easy. But something had shifted. 3 weeks later, the story faded from headlines, though people still occasionally recognized me as the woman who exposed the engagement scammers. Business returned to normal. Expansion meetings resumed. Life moved forward. One morning, while hosting a breakfast with investors, a young woman entered the lobby looking nervous and out of place. A guest made a dismissive comment about her being in the wrong room. I stood up immediately and welcomed her warmly. "Everyone," I said, "this is Nicole, our newest scholarship recipient." The room quieted. I remembered exactly how it felt to be underestimated. As she sat beside me, grateful and overwhelmed, I realized something important. Success wasn't proving people wrong. It was becoming the person you once needed someone else to be. Later that day, I stood in the lobby watching guests come and go across floors I built, beneath lights I chose, inside a life no one had imagined for me. People will always judge what they think they understand. Let them. Because while they're busy looking down, they rarely notice the moment you rise. And the girl they once ignored, she was never invisible. They just never learned how to see her.